Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. U.S.-Russia talks today didn't yield any major breakthroughs, and now Congress is ready to crack down on Russia with sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Biden lifted those sanctions back in May, but under renewed pressure over Russia, will Democrats move to defy the White House? More questions are arising about the way COVID deaths and hospitalizations are counted. Doctors are calling on the CDC to issue clearer guidance, and the CDC director is pressed to clarify the virus death toll. A soccer player in Qatar suffers a heart attack. He's one among multiple athletes who've either suffered or died of heart problems over the past year. This has some people questioning COVID-19 vaccines. New York City's deadliest fire in recent memory. 17 people dead, including 8 children. Residents were trapped in their homes because of large amounts of smoke, which made it impossible for some to escape. Since the weekend, health workers in California who've tested positive for COVID-19 are allowed to return to work. The state's health agencies cite surging cases and staffing shortages. And over the weekend, Shen Yun Performing Arts took to the stage, presenting 20 shows in 7 different cities. Just what makes the classical Chinese dance performance so popular? Top U.S. officials today met with Russian officials in Geneva amid concerns of a possible Russian invasion of Ukraine. The talks didn't yield any major breakthroughs, but Congress is ready to crack down on Russia with a bill to sanction the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Biden lifted those sanctions over the summer, but under renewed pressure over Russia, will Democrats move to defy the White House? NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the details.
Democrats on Capitol Hill have some tough decisions to make when it comes to Russia. This week, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is bringing a bill to the floor that would reimpose sanctions on the Russian Nord Stream 2 pipeline. In the past, many Democrats have joined Republicans in supporting these sanctions, but back in May, President Biden single-handedly waived those sanctions. He's hoping to deal with Russia through negotiation talks. Those negotiation talks kicked off this week, but U.S. officials say there's been little to no progress made so far.
We were firm, however, in pushing back on security proposals that are simply non-starters for the United States.
The U.S. insists that progress depends on de-escalation. Russia has amassed nearly 100,000 troops near Ukraine, although Putin denies that the action is a plan to invade.
There's a path of dialogue and diplomacy to try to resolve some of these differences and avoid a confrontation. The other path is confrontation and massive consequences for Russia if it renews its aggression on Ukraine.
But the administration wants to avoid the Nord Stream pipeline. Biden in May waived sanctions, and critics say it gave Putin a political hand over Europe. Now Congress wants to take matters in their own hands. This week, senators will vote on a bill to sanction the Russian Nord Stream 2 pipeline, a move that's historically been bipartisan. Democrat Senator Jeanne Shaheen co-authored a bill with Republican Senator Rob Portman, urging the Biden administration to seriously reconsider the imposition of the Nord Stream 2 sanctions. And Democrat Senator Menendez was upset with Biden waiving the sanctions too, and he urged the administration to, quote, rip off the Band-Aid, lift these waivers. Now this bill, led by Senator Ted Cruz, is coming to the floor this week, giving Democrats the chance to force Biden's hand to reinstate the sanctions. But will they move to defy the White House? Senator Cruz has heard from many Democrats who say they will vote for this or they're strongly considering it. Now, some Democrats say it does go too far, but the question being posed here for these Senate Democrats is whether they're more committed to upholding their tough on Russia stance by voting to pass this sanction on this pipeline, or if they're more committed to following President Biden's strategy here when it comes to Russia. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Details of President Biden's COVID plan are coming out. The White House says insurance companies must cover 8 at-home virus tests per person per month, starting from Saturday. And insurers must cover an unlimited number of virus tests if healthcare providers order them to do so. And the Supreme Court could make a decision on President Biden's vaccine mandate soon. Some justices are drawing attention for making false claims about the pandemic and the vaccine during oral arguments. NTD's Allison Lee has the details.
During oral arguments on Biden's vaccine mandates last Friday, Justice Sonia Sotomayor made several false claims about the Omicron variant and hospitalizations.
Omicron is as deadly and causes as much serious disease in the unvaccinated as Delta did. We have hospitals that are almost at full capacity with people severely ill on ventilators. We have over 100,000 children, which we've never had before, in serious condition, and many on ventilators.
The World Health Organization said last week that there is growing evidence showing that Omicron is less severe than previous variants. And CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky refuted Sotomayor's claim about pediatric hospitalizations in an interview with Fox News on Sunday.
But the number's not 100,000. It's roughly 3,500 in hospitals now.
Yes, there are, and in fact, what I will say is, while pediatric hospitalizations are rising, they're still about 15-fold less than hospitalizations of our older age demographic.
Data from the Health and Human Services Department suggests that hospitals in the nation are not operating at full capacity. Around 23% of inpatient beds are available as of Monday, and only 19% of the inpatient beds are in use for COVID patients. 22% of the nation's ICU beds are also free as of Monday, and only 30% of the ICU beds are currently in use for COVID patients. During the hearing, Justice Elena Kagan said that workers, quote, have to get vaccinated so that you're not transmitting the disease that can kill elderly Medicare patients, that can kill sick Medicaid patients. I mean, that seems like a pretty basic infection prevention measure. The CDC has said that fully vaccinated people can still catch and transmit the virus. Here's what the CDC director told CNN in August.
Our vaccines are working exceptionally well. They continue to work well for Delta with regard to severe illness and death. They prevent it. But what they can't do anymore is prevent transmission.
The Supreme Court is looking at two vaccine mandates. One is for healthcare workers. The other is for private businesses with over 100 employees. Allison Lee, NTD News.
Soccer players around the world are dying of heart attacks and other heart problems at a striking rate. This weekend, a player began convulsing during a game in Qatar. Thankfully, he's still breathing, but these cases have people speculating whether COVID-19 vaccines have anything to do with these terrible scenes. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
This is professional soccer player Ousmane Coulibaly convulsing during a game in Qatar. The 32-year-old collapsed near the end of the match's first half on Saturday. Coulibaly survived and is in stable condition. That's according to a statement made on his Instagram the next day. Global reports spanning a month indicate that at least 5 male soccer players aged 30 and younger have died of heart problems, such as cardiac arrest and heart attack. That striking rate has some people asking whether COVID-19 vaccines are to blame. Professor of Public Health Jagdish Gupchandani tells me both COVID and vaccines, such as Pfizer's, can cause heart inflammation, which can lead to a heart attack.
What are your thoughts on this issue? Do you think the cases are related to the vaccines?
We cannot say if the cases are related to the vaccines, but I'm of the view that we should monitor these strictly. We should monitor past history of COVID infection, COVID vaccination, and also look at the guidance from CDC, which suggests that many young people, males, young adults, adolescents, have had inflammation of the heart after the vaccination. And as of today, the US CDC has reported more than 15,000 cases of heart inflammation. So it's not really confirmed whether they had the vaccine only or COVID infection and the vaccine, but certainly this needs to be monitored.
Experts would need medical reports of the affected soccer players before drawing reliable conclusions about the surge in heart problems. We asked Qatar Stars League if Coulibaly was vaccinated, but we haven't heard back. A day after Ousmane Coulibaly suffered the heart attack, his wife gave an update on Instagram. She said he's in good hands and thanked God and the doctor, whom she credits with saving his life. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
More questions are being raised about how COVID deaths and hospitalizations are counted. The CDC director on Sunday was pressed about how many people have died from COVID versus with COVID. Meanwhile, doctors are calling on the CDC to issue clearer guidance about counting. Here are the details.
So we followed numerous areas of science.
CDC Director Rochelle Walensky was pressed on Fox News Sunday about how many people have died from COVID versus with COVID. Walensky wasn't able to provide an answer.
Do you know how many of the 836,000 deaths in the U.S. linked to COVID are from COVID, or how many are with COVID but they had other comorbidities? Do you have that breakdown?
Yes, of course. With Omicron, we're following that very carefully. Our death registry, of course, takes a few weeks to collect. And of course, Omicron has just been with us for a few weeks, but those data will be forthcoming.
This comes after Walensky said in an interview with ABC Friday that over 75% of COVID deaths were among those who had at least 4 other health conditions.
The overwhelming number of deaths, over 75%, occurred in people who had at least 4 comorbidities. So really, these are people who were unwell to begin with.
She did not specify whether she was referring to deaths among the vaccinated or overall. Walensky's comments have drawn a lot of attention from medical professionals and critics of government pandemic restrictions. Dr. David Samadi commented on the forthcoming data that will distinguish whether deaths are from or with COVID. Samadi wrote on Twitter, "I've been encouraging this from day one, as it would have changed the entire perspective on the response. Glad it's finally happening." Michael Senger, attorney and author of Snake Oil, How Xi Jinping Shut Down the World, commented on Walensky's statement that 75% of COVID deaths were among those with comorbidities. Senger said on Twitter, "Old enough to remember when this was an insensitive right-wing conspiracy theory. Someone should tell the fact-checkers." This comes as public health officials are beginning to distinguish between hospitalizations from COVID and with COVID. The New York governor last week announced the state's hospitals will adjust the way they count COVID hospitalizations to make this distinction clear. Governor Kathy Hochul's office said Friday that 43% of hospitalized patients weren't admitted because of COVID. NBC over the weekend spoke with California doctors calling on the CDC to specify how patients who test positive should actually be counted.
We have simply been reporting patients who test positive for COVID in one big bucket, and those numbers go to the CDC. And that's what we've really got to change.
They, like many doctors around the country, say these clear distinctions will help us better understand and respond to the virus.
California has been facing staffing shortages in the healthcare industry. In response, the state is allowing healthcare professionals to keep working after testing positive for COVID-19 if they don't show symptoms. NTD's David Lamb reports.
On January 8th, the California Department of Public Health issued guidance that allows COVID-positive healthcare professionals to immediately return to work. Under the new guidance, which is to be used as a last resort, asymptomatic healthcare professionals do not have to isolate or quarantine. The guidance remains in effect until February 1st and stipulates that these employees wear N95 respiratory masks while on the job, and preferably work with patients who've also tested positive. Mandates put into effect last year by Governor Gavin Newsom required healthcare workers to get COVID-19 vaccines or face termination. In October, health giant Kaiser Permanente suspended more than 2,000 employees who are not vaccinated. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
A devastating fire erupted in a Bronx apartment building yesterday, killing 17 people, including 8 children. It's one of the deadliest fires in New York City's history. Authorities are investigating an apartment door that failed to close automatically, which would have slowed the spread of fire and smoke. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
Fire officials said the fire started from a faulty space heater and that they were able to contain the fire, but the smoke continued to travel throughout the building, and that's what caused most of the deaths was smoke inhalation.
Oh my God, people just screaming.
The family that was in the apartment where the fire started was able to escape to safety, but the door to their apartment was left open, which allowed smoke to spread throughout the building.
I was really scared because at that moment I thought I wouldn't survive no more when the smoke was coming inside the house.
My neighbors died. The children died. The children, the parents. I don't understand. I don't understand why that happened like that. But God spared me.
Fatima Wood is one of the survivors. Wood says her daughter got her attention when she first smelled smoke.
We got out the apartment, we opened the door, we saw the smoke. So we left out, we tried to go down the steps, but when we got between the 6th and the 4th floor, we were trapped. So we had to come back up. But a guy named Mohammed was able to grab my daughter and make it out the building with her.
Wood then waited with her husband and her other daughter in a neighbor's apartment until the firefighters came and guided them out of the building, where she was reunited with her daughter.
We do recommend in high-rise fireproof buildings that people should shelter in place, and it's safer to be in your apartment than to venture out and try to get down the stairs and sometimes into a much more dangerous situation.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams wants to reinforce the message of closing doors during fire situations. But he doesn't want others to blame the family who left the door open to their burning apartment when they escaped to safety.
But what we don't want to do is just to add more trauma on the family that was simply trying to escape a very dangerous and a very frightening experience.
Doors in apartment buildings are required to close automatically to prevent fires from spreading throughout the structure. Earlier in the day, on Good Morning America, Adams said there may have been a maintenance issue with the apartment's door, which will be part of the ongoing investigation. He also mentioned that if anyone wants to make a financial donation to help their surviving families, they can donate to the mayor's fund to advance New York City. He said every dollar raised will go directly to the victims of the fire. Officials said about 60 people were injured in the blaze, and 32 people had been hospitalized with life-threatening injuries. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Bob Saget, the actor and comedian known to millions as America's Dad, has died at the age of 65. Saget was found dead Sunday in his Orlando hotel room. NTD's Chenny Wu gives us the details.
Bob Saget, the comedian and actor best known for his role in the sitcom Full House, was found dead Sunday in Orlando, Florida. Orange County Sheriff's deputies were called about an unresponsive man in a Ritz-Carlton hotel room and found Saget's body. Deputies say there was no sign of foul play or drug use, but the medical examiner will make a final determination. Saget had been in Florida for his I Don't Do Negative comedy tour. His last show took place on a Ponte Verde concert hall in Jacksonville, just a day before he passed away. After the Saturday show, he posted on Instagram, "I'm back in comedy like I was when I was 26. I guess I'm finding my new voice and loving every moment of it." In addition to playing Danny Tanner in the Full House, he also hosted America's Funniest Home Videos, another hit TV series at the time. Investigations are still ongoing regarding the cause of Saget's death. Chenny Wu, NTD News.
This weekend, Shen Yun Performing Arts took to the stage for 20 shows in 7 different cities. Just what makes this classical Chinese dance performance so popular? To find out, we asked audiences how they'd describe it.
Moving, inspiring, and uplifting. That's what theatergoers around the world had to say after watching Shen Yun's 2022 program. Over the weekend, the company performed 20 shows in 7 cities, from California to Texas to Miami to Cologne, Germany.
It was an opportunity of a lifetime.
It was absolutely brilliant, a great celebration of 5,000 years of tradition, a fantastic evening for everyone to enjoy.
Perfect word for it was not only entertained, but really inspired and incredibly captivated.
Die Aufführung, oh, die hat mir sehr gut gefallen.
I really enjoyed the show. I've never seen such an interactive blend of live performance and dynamic backdrop before. It was great, and the dancers were amazing. It was beautiful.
Audiences say they walked away feeling lighter.
It was very touching and moving, the show. It put me very much at ease, right, the whole show. It was very comfortable, very almost tranquil in a way.
It was a breath of fresh air, the entire performance. The music activates a part in your chest, like your heart, as it's playing and as the dancers move. And you can just feel the spirituality coming from not only the dance movement, coupled with the cinematography that just blends so well. You don't know the difference between one and the other.
Shen Yun's artists draw inspiration from China's rich history. The nation's traditional culture spans thousands of years and is believed to have been inspired by the heavens.
It's clear that there's a lot of divine inspiration, and through the art of the dance and the music, I think you feel it in your heart without having to think about it too much.
From a purely artistic standpoint, it's absolutely gorgeous. But the importance, what I think is essential, is the fact of adding the moral aspect with a cultural event like this. I like the spiritual message as well, which is very, very needed now. I think postmodernism seeks to promote atheism, to promote materialism. This takes you to another realm.
Audiences called the performance unforgettable.
We'll walk away from here experiencing this, feeling very, very lucky. And, we hope to do it again.
For me, is something that I'll remember for a long time.
It made our year, actually. I was going to say it made our evening, but it made our year.
Next on the schedule, Shen Yun is gearing up for more performances in the coming week across both the U.S. and Europe.
Coming up, New York City is allowing non-citizens to vote. The mayor allowed the bill to pass, but Republicans are now suing him over the new law. And California can no longer criminally charge pregnant women when their conduct leads to stillbirths or miscarriages. The announcement comes in response to 2 cases in which women lost their unborn children after using drugs. That and more when we return on NTD News. Do you vote in your local elections? Voter turnout in New York City has been going down for decades, and often it's only around 20 to 30%. But this might change. The city is now allowing non-citizens to vote. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the details.
Over 800,000 non-citizens can now vote in local New York City elections. That includes people with green cards and work permits. And they'll be allowed to vote after living in the city for 30 days. Mayor Adams says he didn't like the idea that new voters have to be in the city for only 30 days before being allowed to vote, but he ended up letting the bill go through. He explained his decision in a statement, saying, "While I initially had some concerns about one aspect of the bill, I had a productive dialogue with my colleagues in government that put those concerns at ease." Charles Bullock is a professor of political science. He explained the pros and cons of non-citizen voting.
You have individuals who are living within the community who are sending kids to the schools, who are paying taxes probably, and therefore they should arguably have some say-so over the government, which they're probably most likely to be dealing with.
And the downside of it?
If these individuals who are not citizens are allowed to vote in these local elections, they might then begin to have expectations and to make demands that they be able to vote, say, in state legislative elections, because the actions of the state legislature are also going to have some impact over their lives.
Do you think that with New York starting something like this, that in the future non-citizens might even be allowed to vote in presidential elections?
I doubt it. No, I think that there'd be a real distinction between voting in local elections, which arguably a local government like a city or a county could control. With regard to the federal elections, no, that would not be, I don't think that would be feasible.
Rebecca Grace is a national board member of Lexit, the Latino movement to exit the Democratic Party. She disagrees with the new law.
It's a disrespect to the people that actually do it the right way. Like a lot of people in the United States, like my mom, she's Italian and Dominican, and she had to do it the right way.
The first local New York City election in which non-citizens can cast their votes will be next year in 2023. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
And the Republican National Committee is suing New York City Mayor Eric Adams over the new voting law. They argue that American elections should be decided by American citizens. And real estate tycoon Robert Durst, who was serving a life sentence for murdering a friend in 2000, has died at age 78. Durst was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in October for murdering his best friend, Susan Berman. He was long a suspect but never charged in the disappearance of his wife, Kathleen McCormack, who went missing in New York in 1982. Durst was a multi-millionaire whose grandfather founded one of New York City's premier real estate companies. And today was the NFL's version of Black Monday as 3 more teams parted ways with their head coach. And in the college game, Alabama squares off against Georgia tonight for the national championship. NTD's Dave Martin has more.
The Bears and Vikings both fired their head coaches Monday in addition to the Broncos Sunday. But the most surprising of all was the Dolphins getting rid of Brian Flores. Flores has been working with a mostly rebuilding roster for 3 seasons, yet still compiled a 24-25 record, including a 9-8 mark this season. As with most NFL head coach openings, Michigan's Jim Harbaugh is usually mentioned, but for Miami it could have real traction as owner Stephen Ross is a Michigan alumnus as well. Meanwhile, in the college game, Georgia is a 2.5-point favorite over Alabama for the national title tonight in Indianapolis, despite the Tide blowing out the then #1 Bulldogs last month for the SEC championship. Georgia's defense has been the best in the country this year, allowing just under 10 points per game. Alabama counters with Heisman Trophy winner Bryce Young at quarterback and maybe the game's most dominant defensive player in linebacker Will Anderson Jr. Should Alabama win yet again, it would give Nick Saban and the Tide their 7th championship in the last 13 years and 2nd win over 13-1 Georgia this season. But therein lies the biggest hurdle, as beating a team as tough as Georgia twice in the same season is very hard to do. Saban knows this well, as 10 years ago, his Tide won the championship game rematch over LSU after dropping the regular season matchup. Expect a back-and-forth battle with Georgia finishing on top. Dave Martin, NTD News, New York.
Still to come, in a city next door to Beijing, the Omicron variant is causing trouble. 2 cases are confirmed in the city of Tianjin just weeks before the Olympic Games. The news has locals panicking and emptying grocery store shelves. And British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is under pressure over COVID restrictions and compulsory vaccination of healthcare staff. He says ministers will act according to the science. That and more after the break.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, the CEO of MyPillow. Cancel culture has not only affected myself and MyPillow, but millions of you out there. My employees and I want to personally thank each and every one of you for all of your support. At MyPillow, we not only have pillows, but we have hundreds of products, including my new slippers, bathrobes, sleepwear, and my new beds. We're offering the best gifts ever for the best prices ever. For example, we have this exclusive offer on the standard size MyPillows, regularly $69.98, now only $19.98 with your promo code. We also have the queen size MyPillows, regularly $79.98, now only $24.98 with your promo code. And we have the king size, regularly $89.98, now only $29.98 with your promo code. So go to mypillow.com now and use the promo code on your screen or call the 1-800 number below to receive this exclusive offer.
At The Nation Speaks, we don't just scratch the surface. We want to go wide and deep. Our viewers come away with a much richer understanding of the issues of the day. We really make a big effort to bring on different voices onto the show. We don't just talk to experts and newsmakers, which of course are extremely important, but we also want to hear from the American people. So the people who are impacted by the policies and issues that we're talking about, because what they have to say is just as important to the national conversation.
The 2022 NTD 8th International Chinese Vocal Competition will be held at the Merkin Hall of Kaufman Music Center in New York City. The competition is honored to have specially invited vocalists with the world-renowned Shen Yun Performing Arts to serve on its panel of judges. The gold award is $10,000. The 2022 8th International Chinese Vocal Competition. For more information, please visit vocal.ntdtv.com.
nation's third largest school district saw hundreds of thousands of students out of class for 4 days in a row since last Wednesday. Teachers working for Chicago public schools refused to come to school due to concerns over the COVID surge.
Monday marks the fourth straight day that Chicago public schools canceled classes. On Monday afternoon, the Chicago Teachers Union organized a caravan through the city to promote their timeline for remote and in-person learning. The union hopes to start remote learning on Wednesday with the goal of returning to in-person instruction on January 18th. They also proposed that Chicago public schools randomly test at least 10% of the students and staff every week at every school. That program would allow students to opt out. The cancellations come amidst an ongoing standoff between Mayor Lightfoot and the Chicago Teachers Union over remote learning.
Their kids have suffered through learning loss. To the children who have suffered trauma and emotional pain because they've been isolated and torn away from their social networks. We need to go to remote on a classroom by classroom basis or a school by school basis. We will do that, but we will do that based upon the data and the science. We are standing firm and we are going to fight to get our kids back in in-person learning. Period. Full stop.
Lightfoot said on January 5th the school closure should be case-wise, not a brush across the entire school system.
California's Attorney General recently issued an alert stating that women should not be given criminal charges for having stillbirths or miscarriages. The alert comes in response to 2 women who were sentenced to prison for having stillbirths after drug use. Here's NTD's Cynthia Kai with the story.
3 years ago, Adora Perez was sentenced to 11 years of prison after using illicit drugs, including methamphetamine, during pregnancy and having a stillbirth. She is currently incarcerated. A year later, Chelsea Becker was also charged for having a stillbirth after using meth. She served 1 year in prison and has been released on her own recognizance to await trial. On Thursday, California Attorney General Rob Bonta issued an alert stating that women should not be prosecuted, imprisoned, or charged with murder for miscarriages or stillbirths, regardless of the circumstances.
I am announcing that the California Department of Justice is issuing our first ever legal alert to inform law enforcement agencies across California that a person carrying a fetus should not be charged with murder for miscarriage or stillbirth.
Bonta issued the alert to inform all California district attorneys, police chiefs, and county sheriffs.
Today's action was developed in response to the legal issues that arose in Kings County after women were charged and prosecuted for fetal murder by the local district attorney.
California's definition of murder is the unlawful killing of a human being or a fetus with malice aforethought. Bonta says his interpretation of this definition excludes actions done by the mother of a fetus. However, the Kings County District Attorney's Office says the cases are about women who repeatedly used meth that resulted in the death of a fetus. Bonta says his interpretation also does not cover postpartum situations, such as a Mendocino County woman who pleaded guilty last year in the death of her newborn due to her ingesting meth before breastfeeding. Cynthia Kai, NTD News, California.
Body cam footage shows a rescue crew freeing a pilot from a plane just seconds before a train crashes into it. The plane crash-landed onto the tracks in Los Angeles on Sunday afternoon. NTD's Jason Blair has the story, and just a warning, some viewers may find the following footage disturbing.
Officers from the Los Angeles Police Department pulled a pilot from a plane moments before a train crashed into the plane. The close call happened on Sunday afternoon and was caught on police body cam footage. According to the FAA, the single-engine plane took off from Whitman Airport in Los Angeles County. Fox 5 San Diego reported that the plane crashed around 2 p.m. and landed on the Metrolink Antelope Valley Line train tracks. Body cam footage showed rescue crews freeing the pilot from the plane and pulling him to safety just as a train can be heard closing in. The pilot suffered head injuries and was transported for treatment to a regional trauma center.
The pilot was inside the seat still, suffering from injuries, and there was air fuel leaking onto the street.
The LAPD told NTD that they don't expect any more video footage to be released and that the National Transportation Safety Board is handling the investigation. Jason Blair, NTD News, California.
With just weeks before Beijing kicks off the Winter Olympics, the Omicron variant has appeared in a nearby city. To quickly stamp it out, authorities there have ordered mass virus testing for over 14 million residents to be completed in just 2 days. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has the story.
Beijing is on high alert over a neighboring city's first Omicron cluster outbreak. China's northern coastal city of Tianjin began testing its 14 million residents on Sunday. That's after authorities detected 2 local cases of the Omicron variant. The city is about 30 minutes from Beijing by express train, and many commuters work and live in the 2 cities. This outbreak threatens to disrupt the upcoming Winter Olympics, which will be staged in Beijing next month. According to Chinese official media outlet Xinhua, commuters traveling from Beijing to Tianjin have been asked to stay away. The city authorities said on Monday they are aiming to complete mass testing in Tianjin within 2 days. They say it's to, quote, resolutely prevent the virus spreading, especially to Beijing. The city is under partial lockdown. Buses and trains from Tianjin to Beijing have been suspended, and the city closed some subways and canceled some domestic flights. Despite local authorities' promises of adequate supplies, the outbreak prompted a flurry of panic buying. Many supermarkets and grocery store shelves are now empty. The authorities have not announced the end of the lockdown. But looking at the Chinese Communist Party's previous actions, it's likely the lockdown will last until the end of February, when the Beijing Winter Olympics is over. City officials reported another 20 positive cases on Sunday. That brings the total in Tianjin to 40. But the Chinese Communist Party's history of concealing and underreporting virus cases means we cannot independently verify those numbers. The source of this outbreak in Tianjin is still unclear, as the first 2 detected cases reportedly had not traveled outside the city recently, and they had no contact with others who tested positive. But the virus may have been spreading in Tianjin for some time. Authorities pointed to virus cases in another city 300 miles away, saying a university student in Anyang City of Henan Province was also infected with the same type of Omicron variant. The student returned from Tianjin to Anyang at the end of December, and this is believed to be how the highly contagious variant spread. This would mean that at least 2 weeks ago, the student had caught the virus in Tianjin. In a city just outside Beijing, this weekend marked a new round of mandatory virus testing for all residents. That's after the city named Tianjin detected its first cluster of the Omicron variant. A ways away in Xi'an City, residents are also getting retested, even though city officials announced the area had basically achieved its zero COVID goal just days before, meaning the virus is allegedly no longer spreading there. But evidence suggesting the opposite has cropped up since then. This video was captured Sunday morning. That's when some communities in Xi'an suddenly received notice of an emergency round of virus testing. The clip shows a gathering of what looks to be thousands of people. A local resident told NTD that anyone who refuses to get tested will be taken away by police. To protect her identity, we used her last name only.
Basically, it's done every day. When they call us with the loudspeakers, we have to go down and take the test. If you refuse, the police will immediately arrest you.
On Saturday, about 200 neighborhoods in the city were upgraded to a complete lockdown. Under those orders, household doors are sealed shut from the outside, and no one is allowed to leave their homes.
Where there are cases, all infected people will be taken away, isolated, and quarantined. Basically, zero cases means they will be taken outside of the neighborhood.
According to official figures, 45,000 people from Xi'an have been removed from their homes and put in isolation, either inside makeshift hospitals or quarantine centers. Video reveals that even some underground parking garages have been repurposed as quarantine centers, and authorities are still adding beds. As part of the lockdown, Chinese authorities are censoring what they've labeled as negative information, meaning photos, videos, or information about poor conditions or extreme tactics used are quickly removed when posted online. But a handful of them manage to circulate before getting deleted. One clip captures someone on the ground next to a high-rise residential building in Xi'an. Residents can be heard shouting, "Someone jumped off the building." But little can be seen on site, since residents are to stay inside, blocked from getting too close. This is the second similar report from Xi'an to emerge on social media in recent days. No Chinese media outlets have reported on the incidents. NTD cannot verify the motive behind them or if they're related to the pandemic or local lockdowns. The video has since been removed.
And world tennis number one Novak Djokovic is back in practice hours after winning a court challenge to remain in Australia. He thanked the judge who released him from immigration detention and says he's focusing on his bid for a record 21st Grand Slam win. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more.
Djokovic supporters gathered outside a Melbourne court on Monday as a judge ruled that the tennis star be released from immigration detention immediately.
I'm saying that this has nothing to do with health, nothing to do with sport. It's all to do with control and totalitarian regime that's been implementing in Victoria and throughout the Australia as well.
Judge Anthony Calif found the government's decision to revoke the tennis star's visa to enter the country to be unreasonable and ordered Djokovic to be freed within 30 minutes and for his passport and other personal documents returned to him. The decision rekindled the world number one's bid to win a record 21st Grand Slam title at the upcoming Australian Open. Serbs in Belgrade also welcomed the decision.
It was indeed a political thing, although at the beginning I was a bit angry and mad because he's not vaccinated and because he allowed for all this to happen. But in the end, it all turned out to have been a matter of politics.
Djokovic, 34, has been held in an immigration detention hotel alongside long-term asylum seekers since Thursday. The controversy has been closely followed around the world, creating diplomatic tensions between Belgrade and Canberra, and sparking heated debate over national vaccination rules.
Shame on them. They're probably bothered by the fact that Djokovic will win for the 10th time, and that some Serb from small Serbia comes here to win the Australian Open for the 10th time. That's it.
But lawyers for the federal government indicated the fight may not be over, telling the court immigration minister Alex Hawke reserved the right to revoke Djokovic's visa again. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Coming up, in France, over 100,000 people took to the streets over the weekend to protest against vaccine mandates and other pandemic measures. Stay tuned to find out more. Britain's official COVID death toll has now passed 150,000. As quarantine requirements are causing staff shortages, the Prime Minister is under pressure to decide whether to cut isolation to 5 days. And health authorities are concerned that the vaccine mandate for frontline staff will make staff shortages worse. We've got more from NTD's Joy Dogood.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson is under pressure from Tory MPs to set out plans to ease COVID-19 restrictions and deliver a vision for living with the virus. When he visited his Uxbridge constituency on Monday, he said ministers will look at the science and then decide whether to cut the quarantine period to 5 days. On Sunday, the Education Secretary told Sky News cutting the isolation period would help reduce staff shortages in key areas.
I would obviously always defer to the scientific advice on this. It would certainly help mitigate some of the pressures on schools, on critical workforce and others.
Ministers are also under pressure over the vaccine mandate coming for frontline health workers. When the Health Secretary visited King's College Hospital in London on Friday, he was challenged by ICU consultant Dr. Steve James over the mandate. The chief executive of the hospital said he was concerned over whether he will have enough staff to provide for patients safely. He also told BBC that about 10% of his 14,000 staff were unvaccinated. From April, NHS staff in England who have face-to-face contact with patients will need to have been vaccinated against COVID. The former chairman of Britain's Vaccine Task Force also said mass vaccination against COVID-19 should come to an end. Clive Dick said mass testing and vaccination should be ended for all but the most vulnerable after the booster campaign is completed. He is calling for an overhaul of the current government strategy in the coming months, and COVID should instead be treated like flu or a heavy cold among younger people who have been fully jabbed. On Saturday, the UK's official COVID death toll passed 150,000. This figure includes those who have died within 28 days of testing positive for COVID-19. The Prime Minister said it was a terrible toll. Joy Duguid, NTD News.
This weekend was marked with a wave of protests against COVID-19 measures in Europe. In France, the vaccine pass brought more than 100,000 people to the streets. NTD correspondent David Vives has the story.
More than 105,000 people protested across France on Saturday against the government's pandemic restrictions. This was a significant increase from the previous protest in mid-December when 25,000 showed up. The protesters accused President Emmanuel Macron of trampling on their freedoms and treating citizens unequally. In Paris, about 18,000 people took to the streets. They carried signs saying freedom and no to apartheid.
The virus variants seem to be less and less harmful. Still, the government implements measures that are more and more restrictive on people. This is unbearable and absurd.
Many expressed opposition to a planned vaccine pass that would ban the unvaccinated from venues such as cafes, bars, and museums. According to one lawmaker, there's an agenda behind these measures that is not about saving lives.
This is an institutional crisis. People are being disrespected. The government is not trying to save lives here. Moreover, who are the unvaccinated? How many doses of the vaccine does it take to be vaccinated?
Many denounced Macron's recent comments. Macron had said he wanted to irritate unvaccinated people by making their lives so complicated they would end up getting the shots, and that unvaccinated people were irresponsible and unworthy of being considered citizens.
Many policemen do not want to enforce the vaccine pass. We do it because we are obeying orders, but we are not here to mess with the unvaccinated. Our mission is to be tough with criminals, not with the unvaccinated.
There are new calls to demonstrate on January 15th, which is when the French government wants the new vaccine measures to come into effect, but the bill still needs to be approved by the Senate before being implemented. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
And former Trump advisor Steve Bannon had a message of support for the demonstrators in Paris. In a video message, he said there's a global struggle against vaccine mandates and that it's important for people to stand together for the sovereignty of their country and for their own personal health. He said the entire world is watching the situation in France and that the rallies there are inspiring others to stand their ground. And just ahead, a project aims to help cougars cross from one side of Washington state to the other to find mates. For now, a busy highway is all that separates them. And the largest fossilized remains of a prehistoric sea dragon were discovered in the UK. It's around 180 million years old with a skeleton over 300 feet long. Find out more in just a moment here on NTD News.
You worked hard for your money. You invest in stability for your retirement and your family's future, to build and leave them with something greater. The next unprecedented financial crisis, political misstep, or unstable government can depreciate it all away. It was called the gold standard for a reason, the financial preservation of tomorrow. Diversify your assets against inflation, market volatility, and the unknown with real money. Hedge your wealth with the purest form of money, physical gold and silver. Because any currency printed on paper can be manipulated. What's backing up your IRA? Do what you need to do right now to be prepared with the Reagan Gold Group. Visit now, rggusakit.com, or call us at 866-912-1384. Receive up to $2,500 in free silver coins and a free safe with your new precious metals IRA. Call now.
The Olympic Cougar Project is taking on an ambitious mission to help a group of big cats in Washington state. The effort looks to build highway crossings so the animals can cross over to new areas. Conservationists say it'll boost breeding and improve the wider environment.
This adorable cougar kitten will one day grow up to be one of the apex predators in Washington state, where a conservation effort is underway to connect the big cats with mates on the other side of the state in the hopes they have litters of their own. Keeping them apart is Interstate 5, a major freeway that cuts across the Olympic Peninsula, where cougars have lower genetic diversity than in the rest of Washington state.
We know I-5 is a barrier and something needs to be done about it, but we're so early in this process.
Glenn Calif is a habitat connectivity biologist with the Washington Department of Transportation. He's part of the Olympic Cougar Project, which has been tracking, tranquilizing, and fitting cougars with GPS collars to assess where they go and why, with the goal of connecting cougar populations on the peninsula to the rest of the state.
We're in this information gathering phase, and we need to collect information from wildlife cameras and from GPS collars that the Olympic Cougar Project is putting out on dispersing animals like cougars that are going to act as like an umbrella species, and then they're going to tell us connectivity needs across I-5. But the answer is, I think, in my opinion, wildlife crossing structures. These wildlife crossing structures are very effective at bridging habitats if they're built effectively, if they're built correctly, if they're built in ways that species find them attractive, and if they're put in areas that species are or tend to move.
In Southern California, transit authorities are soon to break ground on a wildlife crossing over U.S. Highway 101 in one of the last remaining areas where there is natural habitat on both sides of the freeway. Seth Riley, a wildlife ecologist with the U.S. National Park Service, says that wildlife crossings also improve the broader ecosystem.
I mean, the other thing about mountain lions is they're really the one species that serves that role of being the apex predator. They're really the species that is a significant predator on deer, for example. That's their main prey. Like 90% of the kills that we find are deer. And so, we don't know exactly all the things that could happen if we lose mountain lions, say, in the Santa Monica Mountains, but the truth is that's the only species in that role, and we don't want to do that experiment. If one day we don't have mountain lions anymore in this place, I mean, I think that really will be a sad day.
Scientists have hailed one of the greatest finds in British paleontological history after the largest fossilized remains of a prehistoric sea dragon were discovered in the Midlands. The remains are of an ichthyosaur, a warm-blooded, air-breathing sea creature that probably looked like a giant dolphin. More from NTD's Lorraine Ferrier.
The ichthyosaur is the largest and most complete fossil of its kind ever found in the UK. It is around 180 million years old, with a skeleton 10 metres long and a skull weighing a ton. It was discovered by Joe Davis during a routine draining of a lagoon island at Rutland Water in February 2021. The first ichthyosaurs, which are called sea dragons due to their very large teeth and eyes, were discovered by fossil hunter and paleontologist Mary Anning in the early 19th century. Dr. Dean Lomax, a paleontologist from Manchester University, led the effort to excavate the remains. He said it is a truly unprecedented discovery and one of the greatest finds in British paleontological history. Ichthyosaurs first appeared around 250 million years ago and went extinct 90 million years ago. The remains were dug out by a team of expert paleontologists from around the UK in August and September. Two incomplete and much smaller ichthyosaurs were found during the initial construction of Rutland Water in the 1970s. However, the latest discovery is the first complete skeleton. Lorraine Ferrier, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Did you know YouTube only keeps selected videos on its platform? So if you want to make sure you get the full picture, just subscribe to our newsletter. Go to newsletter.ntd.com and sign up. It's free.